All right, everyone, let's get started about 3 minutes after the hour. So thanks for joining us. We're going to have a webinar on the future of finance and how to set up your on-chain custody with Cryptio and Qredo. So by means of introduction, I'm Jeff Rundlet, the head of accounting strategy at Cryptio. And we also have Ben, who's the VP of strategic partnerships at Qredo. So high level, we'll talk about the agenda. We're going to talk about CeFi and DeFi, some of the issues that we currently see with them, and what both Cryptio and Qredo are doing behind the scenes to help the issues the industry faces. So we'll get into more of each how we're helping from an accounting, security, and governance, and highlight what we're doing to solve the industry's problems. Because right now, I think education is one of the biggest things our industry needs. There's a lot of solutions out there. It's just understanding what they are and how they're helping solve a lot of the problems we face. And then lastly, we'll go into some resources that you all can take away from this and just for some reading material after the webinar. So getting into some CeFi issues, we've heard a lot about CeFi lately with FTX, with a lot of the different CeFi platforms in the news. I think the first challenge there starts with people. I mean, we're trusting people and trusting the people running the businesses to manage the funds and execute the business's services, in the client's best interest. A lot of times they are, but sometimes you get a bad seed or someone doing things that might not be in their best interest all the time. So you have the people element. You also have to work with incomplete or fragmented data, extremely high volumes. You have a lot of legacy systems as well. A lot of in-house systems that don't communicate with each other. And they have to use centralized exchanges to manage financial services. So integrating all these different systems, all the different on-chain activity into one location where they can be accurately maintained, that would be ideal. And just understanding your inventory management could cause another level of issues. So I think a lot of what I just discussed also leads to a lack of transparency. A company could tell you what they have, but is it truly there? Is it truly supported with what they're reporting or what they're stating is there? Because a lot of these are internal systems. A lot of times it takes an army to maintain these systems, and systems break or upgrades happen and things fall through the cracks. So that's another level of what CeFi has to deal with. And on top of all this, processes to add controls in order to mitigate risks within the firm. Companies should be building and maintaining processes to ensure that all the data can be accurately accounted for, that the financial reporting is complete and accurate, and that that often requires an army of people to operate to make sure you could get through month end, to make sure you could stand up to SEC audits and different audit requests. There's a lot that CeFi companies need to go through, and the more people that they have, the more the expenses get transferred to the clients. So, expenses could be higher within CeFi. Another level of what we've talked about a lot this year is proof of reserves. This is something not many people are willing to touch because it's so difficult to prove. It's so difficult to prove all levels of reserves and what that means to the ultimate client in keeping them secure. Another level is that CeFi often requires a KYC. They often require a lot of user information. You're giving up your passport, your driver's license, your social security number, and they hold this within their system. So there's a security risk there. There's also funds deposited in order to activate your account. So you have the timing issues of having fiat settle and having your funds become available so you could actually become active on the platforms. And then we also see a lot of regulating from behind from the regulators. I think a lot of people look at the SEC now from regulating from behind. We've seen fines to Kraken, Nexo, BlockFi, all for doing things they weren't initially provided clarity on. So I think with that, a lot of people are also scared to build CeFi, specifically in the US. But now we have some companies like Coinbase fighting back and trying to take a stance on what the regulation should be and why everything that they're doing is secure and something that they should be able to offer. And then with all that being said, receiving audits from a lot of these CeFi companies with open arms is an issue. Instead of accounting firms fighting for these clients, it's now these companies fighting for accounting firms to do their audits, because all it takes is one bad audit to give a bad perception of a company. And until companies could comfortably be audited, getting to the mainstream adoption could be very difficult. So all that being said is, there's a lot of issues with CeFi. I think right now it's what most people use, but there's so many issues with CeFi. It's why isn't DeFi mainstream activity exploding? But there are some perceived issues with DeFi as well. I'll give you some of my thoughts, then I'll kick it over to Ben, because he's living through this in his day-to-day, being closer to DeFi. But I mean, DeFi does offer an open and transparent network on the blockchain. It gives customers complete control over their assets. There's no or little permissions required, and that all sounds great, right? But what are the issues? And this is just my take, and I want Ben to expand a little bit after I go into them. But users have to also trust the technology that's been built into these DeFi protocols. They have to give users comfort in, how do you know if you receive a reward? How do you know that's the reward you should receive? And I think this is where it goes into the auditing ability of these firms in how do you prove the rewards that have come from there. I think there's some lack of regulatory guidance as well. Even from regulating but from behind, I think it's still so early for DeFi that a lot of people in power don't want to touch it. And they don't want to touch it because they probably don't understand it. And there needs to be a lot more education going on within the DeFi space. And then lastly, it's just the user adoption and the learning curve and getting comfort with moving from what you're comfortable with into a different world, into something that acts a little bit differently, where you might not have the customer support or necessarily need it, but it's just the education in order to be able to get there. And I want to kick it over to Ben, just get your thoughts on some of the challenges you're seeing in the DeFi space.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how DeFi has evolved and continues to evolve. I mean, we started with some pretty basic functionality that involved different types of positions, and the different types of activity has to be kind of looked at and examined. So, if we look at some of the very first protocols, Maker is always something that's worth taking a look at and using as an example. And the Maker position is exactly as you set out. You have to be able to trust the technology. You have to be able to look at the smart contracts, and in a fully functioning normal position where you're loaning yourself assets and nothing goes wrong, and then you're going to repay those assets, then it is solely at your discretion and your risk that DeFi actually that transaction actually occurs. And so you can manage that risk by looking at smart contracts, looking at the people that built the platform, if they're transparent, if they're visible, and that can obviously give you some level of comfort. And you can act in a completely self-sovereign manner, acting against the code and loaning yourself assets through the Maker platform very easily. You could think of that as an automated pawnbroker, where you take your watch into the pawnbroker and you get a loan out of that, and everything works. Where things become a little bit more tricky is where you step into a different position and you end up in a default position. And in the default position, maybe, and there certainly is within Maker's case, there are different parties that participate in terms of that liquidation position. Now, those different parties might be people that you care about, might be people that you don't care about, and the assets that they are liquidating, they haven't had any compliance on them because they haven't had any KYC done on them. And I think that's a mindset that we need to shift out of and say that the on-chain screening is enough of a screen to say that the assets themselves, which can be tested, are suitable for liquidation purposes. And the challenge there is that the regulations change. So if you step back 5 years ago, you could do business with Russian entities. Fast forwards today, given everything that's going on, Russian entities are much harder to do business with today. And so the regulations and what's acceptable practice changes, but the code, ironically, can be much slower to change. And so we need to kind of figure out what people are going to be comfortable with, how we're going to get to a position where we can move forwards and have various different levels of adoption, because the benefits that are made available with these decentralized finance tools are incredibly important to make sure that we get right for the industry. And I use an example really just from when I was last at HSBC. One of the last things that I did before I walked out the door into crypto full time was an investigation into internal staff members at HSBC on the FX desk. And they were involved in an FX deal with regards to Cairn Energy. And they were Cairn Energy was looking to make a transaction. They needed a large FX movement. And in order to do that large FX movement, they used the HSBC desks. And it was found that the HSBC desks actually front run the application of that request and made a lot of revenue for HSBC. And they made a lot of personal bonus off the back of that revenue that was accrued to the bank. Now, the investigation concluded, it actually resulted in one of the individuals going to prison in the US. You can read all about that on the internet. It's all public knowledge. But the ability to front run is near zero in DeFi. It's not impossible. We do have flash loan attacks and we do have MEV challenges to deal with. But the availability of having a seat at the table without having to go through that third party is very attractive. And if we can solve the issues of flash loans and we can solve the issues of MEV, which is absolutely possible, there's a number of different conversations going on at the moment about MEV smoothing, then it ends up as a much more equitable system, a much better system that will result in better outcomes for the users. And when you end up with better outcomes, it naturally gravitates to being the primary choice of the way that you do business. So I think that I'm very excited about DeFi as a whole. I'm very excited about the token space. I'm exceptionally excited about the tokenization of traditional assets. And I think that, ironically, the first things that we're going to see really tokenized will probably be FX positions of various different stable coins and different currencies. And we'll be able to use these tools to move into and we're already seeing it with teams like Maple and Atlantis and various other different types of tools that are out there that are bringing a really balanced and considered hybrid approach of DeFi technology with corporate and compliant approaches in terms of overlaying that on top of them to enable people that are a little bit risk averse to get in with a lot more confidence.
All right, thanks, Ben. That was really good. I think that leads us pretty nicely into like, why do we want to get to DeFi mainstream adoption? I think it's a big reason why a lot of us are here in crypto, and those not working directly in crypto, they're probably interested and want to get there as well. But it's getting everyone else there that doesn't even know about it. I think one thing is that it'll give financial inclusion. I mean, one thing that a lot of people don't have access to around the world is a bank that will bank with them, or centralized organization to do trading or to do activities between counterparties. So it'll really open up the floodgates for everyone in the world. The other piece is just transparency. As Ben was saying, the transparency behind all this is going to build trust, and it's going to build a better platform where people are going to want to go there. They're not going to feel like they're getting used or front run into the trades or activities that they're doing. So I think that's probably the biggest one is transparency. What's going on in the blockchain? There's no secrets. Everyone can figure out everything going on and feel comfortable with the activity. And if you're not comfortable, just sit on the sidelines. And then the last piece is smart contract security. A lot of people don't understand a lot of the security that these smart contracts bring with them. So it's making sure we could educate everyone into what these smart contracts are doing and how it's actually benefiting people, as opposed to being a complex engine that they just don't understand. And I think that leads us into more of what Cryptio is doing. So Cryptio has recently released a Colossal, which was the next generation platform in helping build enterprise level, enterprise grade accounting and auditability to different enterprises. What we're trying to do is build a platform that provides all enterprises with the auditability to make sure that they can stand up to audits, do their financial reporting, and just get through their month-end closes accurately. So I'm going to dive into a few of the things that we've been doing in this release. The first one is just a bright, shiny user interface. It's more user-friendly. There's some more charts within the user interface, and it gives more of a visual into what's going on within your company. I consider this more of the treasury management aspect. You get to see in one snapshot what's going on in your company and where are things trending. We've also built in smart contract engines. And what I mean by this is that we've indexed all of our own chains. We understand how these smart contracts work, and we can help automate the smart contracts to help you record everything in the GL accurately based on what is going on the blockchain. So our team has worked effortlessly in understanding these DeFi protocols, understanding these complex NFTs, so we can help you report everything in the GL completely and accurately. On top of that, we've rolled out a very robust reporting suite with this release. I think we have something like 27 reports in total, including asset roll forwards, which will be required from the FASB moving forward. We have very robust journal entry support. So we're not just making your journal entries, but we're proving to you and your auditors that they're accurate through reconciliation processes. We support GAAP, IFRS, any type of reporting you need. And the reason is because we track everything at the unit level, tracking the cost, the book value, and the fair value. And that goes to impairment. We took our time on impairment. We took our time to get it right. There could be a lot of issues with rushing this to market because it's a very complex process. You need to be able to track the book value now of your impaired assets to make sure your financial reporting is right. And we've battle tested our impairment with some of the biggest names in the industry to make sure that we got it right. We also have increased cost methodologies to help you maximize your financial reporting and taxes. Have everything from FIFO, LIFO, weighted average cost to HIFO. So we see a lot of different needs from different cost methodologies, depending if you're doing your financial reporting or taxes. We've also had a lot of focus on DeFi and NFT activities. You can see up here that we have a DeFi and NFT module, which gives you a snapshot view into what is going on with your DeFi positions, what's going on with your NFT positions. So you could track them all in one module. So you could track the gains and losses, unrealized gains and losses, and keep track of your inventory accurately. Another rollout is the principal markets. We've rolled out a state-of-the-art, up to speed with top accounting standards, which is a single source by asset principal market. So, for example, for Bitcoin, you could pick Binance. For Ethereum, you could pick Coinbase. Wherever you see the best fit for your principal market. And not only that, we provide transparency into the principal markets through audit reports. So you could run different reports to show the different principal markets you're using by asset, when you've changed them, ultimately just to provide supreme transparency into everything going on. That's what we want to do. I mean, we're supporting the blockchain, and in doing that, we're trying to be as transparent as possible so you could be as transparent as possible to your auditors or in your financial reporting. And lastly, and it's something we've been focused on from the beginning, is auditability. And that starts with data integrity. So at Cryptio, we're running our own nodes, indexing our own chains. And in doing so, we can make sure that we have complete and accurate data. Now you can see on the screen here, we have a data integrity page where you could also run, we call it a sanity check, but this is a reconciliation of all your balances in Cryptio back to the source, back to the blockchain, back to the CeFi exchange to ensure that you have zero discrepancies. And if you do have discrepancies, we could at least understand why and explain them to auditors or to people that are concerned, CFO. We also have inventory checks, reconciliations to make sure that you have full mappings of your chart of accounts, to make sure that every single unit within Cryptio has been reconciled back to your general ledger to make sure you're not missing any entries. And that's what we're most focused on right now, is to become audit ready. And if a company isn't in need for audits right now, they most likely will be in 1 to 2 years. So it's our advice to get in there early and make sure that you don't ignore, the auditability functions when you're a smaller company, because you're going to grow, you're going to scale, and you're going to have to get through audits. And one of the most difficult things from my experience is looking back and trying to recreate reports, trying to recreate support for the auditors, showing them why you made specific journal entries. And within Cryptio, we help automate all this and add a high level of certainty as well within what you're doing and how you're doing your financial reporting. So on to Ben. Ben's going to go through more of what he's doing at Qredo.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of taking in everything that you've just said really is pretty amazing. The position that we're in now from this industry, the shift that we're going to see from a position where audits were hard to achieve, people were scared about moving into crypto assets. I think that the more people that are involved from a traditional finance space and a space that cares about the auditability and the transparency, recognize that crypto as a framework is just just another durable medium, but I think it's the best durable medium that we've got. With the blockchain capabilities that exist, you just cannot go wrong in your GL. It's pretty amazing. And I cannot wait really for another kind of 2-3 years to elapse where the audit teams are saying, look, I don't want to touch traditional finance because it's too old, it's too laggy, it's too slow, it's too prone to error. Pay me and move in crypto assets so I've got full transparency and I can do all my auditing and transparency in real time. Thank you very much. Because otherwise it's just going to be too difficult. And I think, fund managers, hedge funds, DAO projects that are running in this space today are going to take a substantial step forwards and become the next big players in the space. And it's going to be a very interesting 18 months as we see the more traditional funds kind of enter into this space and the layers of tooling that they've got that they can now get exposure to on these assets. And when they get exposure to the amazing quality that the blockchains can offer them over the control and security of their assets, they're not going to want to do anything else. So it's an incredibly exciting time. And we've just got to persevere in terms of getting through it. And that perseverance really, for me, is quite a personal journey that I've been on. Obviously, coming out of HSBC and the traditional financial space and having to deal with traditional finance activity for all of my career, the challenges that were involved when I went full-time in crypto in 2017 were pretty immense. The narrative that I have is that the first kind of team that I was involved in managed all of their treasury on a single ledger. That treasury was held in ETH because off the back of a token event. and that ETH was claimed, was raised at ETH $70. Now, over the course of 2018, that $70 turned into $1,400. So the $10 million, $12 million that we raised turned into close to $120 million sitting on a single ledger. And we really needed a enterprise grade security solution that would allow us as a team to be able to manage our assets. They just didn't exist. Everybody that we spoke to in the custodial space all said, here's our process for managing and securing keys. The first step that you have to do is you have to give up your assets to us. So they sit on our balance sheet. You then have a claim on those assets, but you don't then own them. And that didn't really sit very well with me or my team. And it was a problem that was very apparent that needed solving in the space as we move forwards. So at Qredo, what we've built over the last 4 years, and I've just relaunched our new platform, taking in lots of feedback from different clients and really streamlining it, is a platform that allows you and your team to manage your crypto assets with your governance. And what does that mean? It means that we recognize the challenges that exist within an organization, the fluctuations of staff, the way that teams move in, move out of different roles, people get promoted, people change jobs, the level of kind of authority that you have within an organization naturally changes. If you start with a junior team, you might want to, as those junior members grow, you might bring in more juniors. So your governance layer obviously expands. If you're a director, then you want to be able to delegate access to individuals to take away the administrative burden and make sure that the finance team has got all the control and the right different types of access on this. And so we started at that position. It's like, how do we abstract private key management into governance? And the way that we do it is we use 3 different pieces of technology. The first piece of technology that we use is the decentralized MPC protocol. And that protocol is distributed around the world in many different jurisdictions to avoid the challenges of a single jurisdiction taking a stance against crypto. Because what we've seen is that single jurisdictions can be very restrictive in terms of their approach and their foresight with regards to organizations or teams dealing with crypto. So by distributing the MPC nodes all around the world, we mitigated that risk. The next position is that anywhere within a traditional CeFi custodian that used a database, we now rely on a blockchain. So the Qredo ecosystem actually has a Qredo blockchain at its heart of its operations. Now that operation is also decentralized and is run by validators. So again, we're taking the best of blockchain to actually move forwards. And then into that blockchain, we write the governance positions. Well, I say we write the governance positions. You write your governance positions. You control the chain. You control your signing agents. Your team are issued their own BLS threshold key management keys. And those keys will scale from 1 of 1, where you can use it to replace your ledger if you choose to 3 of 5, which seems to be the typical kind of user base that we see, all the way through to hundreds and hundreds of different BLS signatories, which means that it could extend potentially to a DAO ecosystem where there's like several hundred users all needing to kind of vote and control on assets. And so using those 3 different pieces of technology, so the MPC, the blockchain, and the BLS threshold keys, we can actually abstract from that private key management issue into governance and allow you to own your own assets, to have title over your own assets, and for those assets to legally represent on your balance sheet, which I'm not sure there's another custodian provider out there that, or security platform out there that can do that for a team. Maybe Gnosis Safe, but Gnosis doesn't have the flexibility that we have. you end up in a much more structured, rigid framework.
Next slide then.
Yes, please. So actually what I'm going to show you here is the new Qredo. And you can see that we managed through. You can see the new user interface that we've put up. And what we're doing now is obviously we've logged in and we're creating a portfolio. Now you can add members, you can create different wallets, you can have different wallets for different usernames or different strategies. And then you can choose and select how you set that policy up. So you could have your finance team, you could have your trading team, you could have your marketing team. We're seeing a lot of enterprise users come into the space now with the back of all the NFT positions. You obviously be able to see all the history, the tracking with regards to the information that you've got on your chain. You see various different balances that you're holding and how those positions have moved through. Now, when you engage in a DeFi protocol, it's very simple. It's almost as simple as you've got used to when you're using your MetaMask on your browser wallet today. But the difference being is that the signatories can be distributed to your team members to that governance. So you get a 4 or 6i approach in terms of who's going to sign off and who's actually going to execute the positions. In addition to the signatories that you've got, you can white label and whitelist certain smart contract positions. And that's our first step. We're actually going deeper than that in our current roadmap and looking to actually white label smart contract calls. So one governance structure could actually put risk on, and you'd need another governance structure, an extended governance structure to take risk off. Now, finally, what we've realized is that this is great, but if you're having a 3 of 5 signature threshold, then maybe actually what you need is some automation in there as well. So as well as that, we've got the ability to add signing agents, which are robot signatories that you can control, that you can add into your governance structure that will allow you to transact on certain capabilities. And what that means is it gives you a lot more flexibility, a lot more dynamic capability within your organization. And it also means that you can set boundaries of different activities happening at different times. Meaning, for instance, that if you have taken a loan out against some ETH that you've got in a Maker Vault or something else, that you don't have a collateral call at 2 o'clock in the morning where your entire team needs to get out of bed and authorize on their mobile phones. You can have automated processes looking for certain trigger events that can take care of the risk management positions. And so what we'll do is we can help you. We think the journey is very intuitive at the moment, especially with the new UI that's been set up. We can help you get set up and create a bespoke entity that's perfectly aligned with your organization, help you create workspaces, various different portfolios, and then explain to you the difference between vaults, which allow you full segregated assets, where you can do proof of reserves and secured, or Web3 wallets that allow you to transact and interact more easily with DeFi and different other types of assets. So it's really up to you as how your risk management goes forwards, what assets you're looking to achieve, to hold, to stake, what you're looking to do in the world of DeFi or the world of crypto assets as you're moving through. And what's really important is all of this is going to tie in with the Cryptio toolset. So you'll be able to take all of this activity, tie back to a certain different transaction, use Qredo to see who signed off on that transaction at what time, make sure that they obviously had authorization to do so, and then understand near instantaneously what your taxation, what your accounting position is going to be on that. And so when you do decide to step up, you can decide to choose one of 3 different wallet types. We've got our amazing MetaMask institutional, which is the real deal. It's it's closer than you've ever seen, with amazing kind of capabilities directed at Web3. We've got our Wallet Connect wallets, which allow you to get operating at a very kind of low cost entry. And we've got our incredible Web3 API wallets, which allow programmatic access to sign transactions. Now that can be anything from anything you can think of. You can do various different things with it. So you might want to say, send periodic transactions on a regular basis. You might want to look at certain event types, monitor web activity, engage in different protocols, do consistent repeated order buying, protective order buying, collateral management, anything you can think of, you can automate with the Web3 API wallet. And the really amazing thing is that the programmatic signing agents work not only with the Web3 API wallet, but also with Wallet Connect and MetaMask institution as well, which means that you can put governance over these assets, over these organizations, but you can actually empower your staff to operate on a very, very long leash in terms of the type of activity that they're doing. So you don't necessarily need two people working in conjunction to operate a 2 of 3 policy, because you can have one person empowered and then 2 bots that sit and manage and provide a framework in which that organization can ask that individual to operate. And really the last position that I wanted to kind of just touch back on is the position that was kind of mentioned earlier in the conversation about how we've moved forwards now from a different mindset in terms of auditing. And we believe at Qredo, as well as the Cryptio team, that the traditional certifications like the ISO standards are incredibly important. But also we've got to have the security audits and the detail and the smart contract audits from the next generation of teams. And we will need, for the industry, a harmonized position of smart contract audits. But right now, the best thing that we can do is make audits transparent until we've got there. So as well as doing all the ISO stuff, the ISO 22301 and the 27001, we've also got our SOC Type 2, and we've also got insurance from Lloyd's of London. Importantly, what's the foundation for all of this is the Apache Milagro position. Now, anybody that knows anything about the web understands that Apache is fundamental to everything that has been done. And I personally spent a lot of my early days in career building websites and using Apache tools like JCat and other various different kind of positions. It's a real honor to be able to contribute to the Apache Foundation's position with regards to security. And we put a lot of effort in building our MPC structure into Apache Milagro, which is really important because it gives you an open source position that enables you to build from the strongest foundations that exist in the world today. And with such incredible and empowered talent helping drive this community, it enables Qredo to build off all of the good work that we've done, but also put forwards into the world some amazing ideas and make them free and open to the world. So it's a full stack, and the part in the middle is the part that people expect today, but it's the part of the edges that are really going to make the difference. And I'd urge everybody to make sure that you really touch those edges and you understand what's coming next, especially as you're here today listening to this and looking to engage in crypto assets as a business as usual activity.
So that wraps everything up. We could take some questions now, if anyone has anything for Ben or myself.
So I can see a question in the chat. It says, do you think that the IRS has intentionally held back on heavy-handed audits to date in order to scare the public away from crypto investing at some point in the future? Jeff, why don't you take that one, and I'll add my thoughts at the
I
end.
think this is definitely opinionated, might get political a little bit, but or maybe just the anti-crypto. I feel like they could be buying time for the industry, specifically the banks or the governments, to catch up with where, where everything has moved. I think that they could be buying time, or they could be scaring people into, fully going in, into the deep end instead of just, putting their toes in the water. So I think there could be an element of, scaring people away to buy time because they know that this is the future. But I mean, that could be a very biased view, and, supporting crypto as much as I do, and, just believing in the future of it. So I would say I do partially agree with that statement.
Yeah, I mean, I would more than partially agree. I would fully agree. I believe that at this moment in time, even though crypto is just what 1.3, 1.x trillion dollars worth of market cap, there was a great fear that an asset such as this could threaten the position of the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world, and just the threat that potentially could exist, even though it's small. I fear that the governments that are in power today, especially in the US, are desperate to crush that until they can feel that they can fully control it. And the ironic thing is that they can fully control it today, because we have good compliance frameworks that enable and allow KYC to be undertaken, assets to be invested in. But this is not uncharted territory. We just have to step back in time after the 1928 US stock market crash and look at what happened to gold in 1933, when there was a presidential order executed to ban individuals holding gold. So there is a real fear about the lack and the ability to have assets that can't be controlled by government bodies. I don't think you're ever going to get away from a position where an individual can hold their own crypto assets. But actually, I see a world that's much more open, and much more open to corporates, individuals, organizations, helping individuals manage different exposure to their assets and have access to different decentralized platforms to undertake various different activities, because the outcomes of which are so much better. We go back to the FX position with Cairn Energy and being front run, for example. The outcomes are better for people. The spread and the depth and the ability to flow into that underbanked and unbanked populations of the world is very important. And I think that we've all had the rug pulled over our eyes for quite some time. And it's only if you've existed in a world of high inflation that you realize how important it is to make sure that you can control the assets that you own, and you can own high quality assets. Because people that have experience of Venezuela or Argentina or El Salvador in that high inflation environment, it's a very scary place to try and live and exist. And so, yeah, I think that traditional governments have taken stances, and I do think that it will come out in the future, the actions that the governments took against the banking structures that were supporting crypto. But actually, I think we've ended up in a much stronger position now than we actually were before. Because now, if you look at Circle are using, global systemic financial institutions to back up their reserves. And so when you're dealing with such an amazing organization like that, where would you rather have a dollar? Would you rather have a dollar in a small provincial bank? Or would you rather have a dollar given to Circle, who have got world-class treasury management that can evidence and through proof of reserves demonstrate their audit capabilities at the drop of a hat, and actually have, you know, potential yield on that with access to money market instruments that can be used to really kind of protect yourself. We're coming to a very exciting time, and we just have to get through this next 18 months to 2 years of regulatory FUD that exists in the world. And I think the next US presidential campaign, I think crypto will be quite a diversive topic and discussion point.
Yeah, I agree there, Ben. I mean, we've seen talks of Operation Choke Point 2.0. That's the banking, squeeze that you're talking about, basically squeeze out the fiat or the funding. So, they can't operate. We're members of the chambers of digital commerce, and we get a lot of good insight. So it's not all against crypto. You have guys like McHenry who are really fighting, who are calling out the bad players in the industry. So there's a lot of talks going on behind the scenes that a lot of us aren't aware of. But there is the support for crypto as well. But like you said, Ben, it depends what side of the aisle you're sitting on. What you want as a future of more government control or less government control. And ultimately I think 2 years will shake it out, but it's crypto, it's blockchain. You're not going to be able to stop this. And if you stop it, say in the US, it's just going to go abroad. You already have companies like Coinbase saying that they're going to open up international locations, and they could easily change those to the headquarters. So there's a double-edged sword with, if you fight it hard enough, you're going to scare everything away and not be the future of it, or you could, welcome it with open arms and, potentially be the future of, the next cutting edge industry. I think we went through fintech for the past 20 years. I think it's time for a shift to something different. I think a lot of people see that as blockchain and blockchain companies. I mean, you see tons of talent coming over to this space. So you could fight it, but it's a tough fight. It's a tough one to fight, in my opinion.
I think the challenge, if I look back, I went down the crypto rabbit hole in 2013. I came across Bitcoin and I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. We now have the world's first digitally scarce asset that can't be double spent and settles in 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, okay, well, let's just apply that technology to all of the assets that we've got in the bank. That's amazing. Now, what happens if we move all of the assets that we've got within HSBC that currently settle at T+2 to T0 or T plus 10 minutes? And the impact that has is profound, because some very rough calculations that we undertook back in 2014, 2015, and there were a small group of us that really kind of believed within the HSBC rules that crypto was going to be the future of capital markets. We estimated that if we moved assets from a T+2 position to a T0 position, the amount of capital charges that we could save under the Basel guidelines would be equivalent to running the bank for 7 years. So it's 7 years worth of OPEX that we could save and unlock from the capital charges. Now it's like, we looked at each other and we said, we shouldn't be doing anything else other than tokenizing all of these assets and moving them on chain to settle at T0 because of the capital charges. If you can run a business for 7 years without having to make a profit, there's nothing else that we should be doing. So the challenge that I faced when I walked these kind of numbers around the halls and spoke to various different managing directors in the firm was that, Ben, I've got 5 years to retire. I've got school fees. I've got a mortgage that I want to pay off. I'm not really up for this fight right now. It will happen when it happens. And they weren't going to implement it. So they weren't going to take their positions, and they were looking at the impact of what this would do. And The instant settlement would strip out hundreds of jobs within the organization. We're now dealing with AI and a lot more automation as well, which would take staff and headcounts even lower than I could have possibly imagined. Banks and large capital organizations are going to be very different in terms of the staff base that they have in the next 5 years. And if we're lucky, some of the listeners on this call and the people who are asking questions today, some of those firms might actually be the gorillas in the room in 5 or 10 years. So, this is our fight, and we need to take it to the table. And the way that we fight is by making our systems 1,000 times better than the systems that are currently incumbent.
Yeah, I agree, Ben.
So we've got time for one more question.
Yeah, if there are any more questions, please. Will we see a day when crypto is designated as legal tender in the US? I would say yes, eventually, but it's more from a gaming perspective where, if other countries are starting to do it and the US is last, they're going to be far behind. So I think that's where a lot of this is getting, like, a lot of what's going on right now is maybe buying time so we're prepared for it as legal tender when they're ready. But it's going to be a push and pull. Is it going to be Bitcoin is legal tender or a CBDC, as the government rolling it out as the only legalized legal tender? So it's what is crypto and what will be legal, I guess, as tender.
So my positions on this are not divisive, but they're very based on things that have happened in the past. I don't believe that you and I as individuals will be able to hold a CDBC or a Fed dollar or a Bank of England pound. I don't believe that would be the case. And I don't believe that will be the case because I fundamentally believe that that issuance would break fractional reserve banking. And I don't think that any central bank wants to break fractional reserve banking. I do see a position where CDBCs are used as collateral management for different firms where they have to demonstrate and instantaneously show the capital reserves that they have on their balance sheet at a particular point in time, which if you think about a resolution requirement and the things that happen with Silicon Valley Bank, I think we would have had a lot more transparency on that and a lot more opportunities to have given that a softer landing. I do believe that today we're going to see a proliferation of stablecoins. And that proliferation of stablecoins, in my opinion, may last, it may not last. I think it will probably last for about 5 to 7 years. And I think that will be the case because I think we've gone through this journey before with the US state bank notes and the wildcat banks that existed in the US in the 1860s, 1870s. And back in those days, any bank could issue their own notes based off the gold reserves that they had in their vault. And it was all, our vaults are up in the mountains, nobody's going to go there. The only things that can get them are the wildcats. No sane person is going to go up there. And then from there, we get the concepts of Gresham's law and that kind of good money drives out bad money. And, we will have a position where one stable coin is trading not at par to another stable coin because of the risk management procedures that are coming through. So I think we will get to a position where the Fed or various different central banks offers up a digital framework to regulated parties to enable them to print US dollars in electronic form. And just in the same way that they do today with fractional reserve banking. But I think it will just be a digital or crypto version of today's dollar that doesn't impact CDBC in quite the same way. I don't think there's a desire to break fractional reserve banking because there's so much of the world that's dependent on debt, and things would unravel pretty quickly if that was the case. So are we going to see all the efficiencies? Yes. Are we going to see the usage of blockchain? Yes. Are we going to see digital assets that are controllable by government entities? Yes, probably, if the US government provides this contract that can be controlled. Arguably, things like USDC can already be controlled at some level, shape, or form. Is it going to be one-to-one redeemable with the dollar that's sitting in the Fed itself? No, absolutely not, because you're not going to be looking for normal human beings to have accounts at central banks.
It's good feedback, and I think that that just about wraps up our time here. But what you can do is you could download Cryptio's Get Audit Ready. It'll cover a lot of the things that I covered today. So you can find this right on our website. You could also join our community. We send out a monthly newsletter to keep you informed, and also just inform you with what's going on in the industry. And please reach out to both Ben and myself if you have any additional questions or want additional content that we covered today.
Yeah,
so
just
thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. It's amazing to get a partner like Cryptio at the table. It's something that, yeah, I've wanted for a very long time, and I think you guys are doing a tremendous job. So thank you.
Likewise, Ben. Thank you, everyone. Bye.